If you've ever had a student freeze up over an assignment, avoid participation, or stare at their blank screen like it personally insulted them, then you already know academic anxiety is real. But the good news, confidence can be built. And today, we're stacking those confidence bricks high. Welcome to the What and Who of Edu, where we bring you insights from the leading educators, researchers, and innovators who are shaping the future of teaching and learning. From emerging teaching trends to real-world classroom strategies, we break it down to help you create a more impactful, inclusive, and effective learning experience. I'm your host, Marissa Bluestone, and today we're bringing you 10 tips from educators who have been there and done that. And they're sharing their best strategies for helping students push past their fears and develop the kind of self-assurance that transforms their learning experience. And if you'd like to know more about our featured educators, we've added their bios in the show notes. Today's guests, their insights come straight from the classroom. They're sharing what's worked well with their own students who've faced everything from, I'm just bad at math syndrome, to, I swear my keyboard is judging me paralysis. So stay tuned to hear why exams are like first dates, mistakes are made on purpose, and why your students might just need a squad to succeed. So, how do we help students shake off that fear and start building confidence? It all starts with engagement, because no one raises their hand, submits that first assignment, or takes a risk unless they feel safe enough to try. Tip number 1. English class can give some students flashbacks to red-inked essays and terrifying oral presentations. But Adriana Bryant, an English instructor at Lone Star College Kingwood in Texas, has a trick, and that's build a squad.
Most students are pretty nervous about taking an English course because that's not their favorite subject. I always take that into consideration coming into the classroom. So I focus a lot on their strengths when they come in, and I make that known from the very beginning because I want to set that positive environment for them. And so I often establish what we call like community groups within my classes. And so I think this really helps them to feel comfortable and to understand that everything's a learning process and it's a journey that we take together. And so by establishing those kind of community groups and that idea that you're going to have a group of people that you can work with and you'll feel more at ease, and also letting them know that mistakes are part of that process and to feel comfortable to make those mistakes. And so I think that that often kind of alleviates that tension that they feel initially.
Adriana creates a built-in support system from day one. It's not about who can write the best essay the fastest. It's about growing together, learning from each other, and realizing that nobody is in it alone. Because confidence in the classroom doesn't come from eliminating anxiety. It comes from knowing you don't have to face it by yourself. Of course, sometimes students don't naturally form a squad. You have to give them a little motivation. And for Dr. Mike May, the lower division coordinator in the Department of Mathematics and Statistics at St. Louis University, where he's taught for more than 30 years, that motivation is making himself the classroom's common enemy. Because tip 2 tells us that if they don't join a group, they're volunteering to explain everything to the class.
I encourage group work and will encourage them by anyone not working in a group is volunteering to explain to the class. That makes me the common enemy that they all get to band together against. And when someone asks a question, I talk about how it is hard to ask questions in class. And so I ask who else has the same question and make the comment, anyone not volunteering that they have the question is volunteering to answer the question. And at which point all the hands go up and I tell them, everyone with their hand up has to turn to the person who asked the question and say, thank you for asking the question. It's embarrassing to have the spotlight on you where everybody thinks they're the only stupid person in class. And to attack that directly, I've asked lots of questions in class, but they get to talk to each other. And if they won't talk to each other, then they're volunteering to talk to the class. And normally students are friendly enough that having a common enemy will get them to band together and to help one another.
Mike May's strategy works because it lowers the fear of speaking up. Students aren't just learning from him, they're learning from each other too. But what happens when fear isn't about answering questions, but about sharing something more personal, your own writing? Jennifer Duncan, Associate Professor of English at Georgia State University's Perimeter College, knows the key to making peer review less painful and simple, which takes us to tip 3, and that's build the community first.
So for me, the biggest thing that I can do to help them overcome their anxiety is to help them recognize that I am here and I am a human and I'm going to answer them and I'm going to respond to them. So sometimes that's an intro survey where then I can reach back out to them and say, hey, in this survey, 30% of you said you're working moms, or 10% of you said that you have kids at home, or 55% of you say that you're over the age of 40. So to kind of reassure them that they're not alone so that they start to think of themselves as part of this community of people who are not unlike them and they are not an individual sitting alone. And I think that's something really important to do at the beginning of the semester before they start looking at each other's writings, because that can be very vulnerable. And if you feel like you're handing your writing to a stranger, that's a lot different than I feel like I'm handing this writing to someone who may be like me.
By the time peer review rolls around, it's less, here, take my fragile and perfect writing and destroy me, and more, hey, we're in this together. Help me make this better. So, feeling like part of a community helps. But what happens when there is no classroom and no face-to-face reassurance? There's just screens and silence. For tip 4, we join the world of Betsy Langness, a psychology professor and department head at Jefferson Community and Technical College. She teaches in a fully virtual asynchronous environment. So when students are logging in for the first time, they're not just wondering, will I understand psychology? They're also thinking, how does this all work?
One of the things I like to do at the very beginning of class, and I will preface this by saying I teach asynchronously, so that can make somewhat of a difference, is I always like to ask them, what do they want to get out of the course? What do they want to learn? And then I give them a lot of low stakes introductory assignments to kind of get them used to the technology so they understand what's going to be expected of them, but they're not scared then to try it because they're getting extra credit for it, or it's very low stakes. And I'm just asking them questions about themselves.
Basically, she sets up her students for small wins early on. No one's being tossed straight into Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment or diagnosing cognitive biases before they've even figured out how to submit an assignment. Once students feel like they belong, the next challenge kicks in. What if they mess up? That fear of failure can be paralyzing. But the best educators don't just allow mistakes, they model them. And we'll learn about what Dr. Kristen Monroe does in her chemistry class in tip number 5. Dr. Monroe is an assistant professor of chemistry at Landmark College, where she teaches neurodiverse students. And she knows a thing or two about failure. In fact, she leads with it.
Chemistry is, in many cases, an anxiety-prone class. I start off by sharing that I failed my first chemistry class in high school. I think that it's important to share both our successes and our failures. Successes because we have to build the trust of our students that we know what we're talking about, but failures because we're not always transparent about the things that don't work well.
That's right. She tells her students, I bombed my first chem class. And instead of losing credibility, she gains it. Her message? Failure isn't final. It's how learning happens. And if a professor can fail and come back stronger, her students can too. Our 6th tip is from Julie Moore, who knows that writing can feel intimidating. The Eastern University Online Academic Advisor, first-year composition instructor, and poet, has students that come into her class believing that they can't write. Their bad grammar and fear of getting in trouble for saying the wrong thing can be overwhelming to them.
We know the old joke, the three worst fears people have are death, taxes, and speaking in public, right? So public speaking anxiety also gets a lot of attention. Writing anxiety, not so much, but a lot of students are anxious. A lot of students have been given the message as they've gone through junior high and high school that they're not good writers, or that they have nothing important to say, or that they don't have a right to say what they have to say, that they don't have a voice.
Yikes. Of course, Julie can't rewrite every bad experience her students have had with writing instruction. She can make sure their first assignment in class doesn't feel like a test of their worth. How? By making those first steps low stakes.
First off is beginning the class with very low risk, right? Low impact kinds of writing assignments, so that they're not right away writing something that has, oh, this is worth, a whole bunch of points and I have to do this paper correctly. But just starting out with little bite-sized assignments, and even starting with reading assignments, because a lot of times I find that students do not write well because they are not reading.
Before asking students to run, she makes sure they can walk. No big scary essays in week 1. No formal high-stakes papers before they've built up some confidence. Just manageable, meaningful steps towards stronger writing. In other words, start small. Like, really small. Dr. Margaret Holloway knows that first-year writing courses come with baggage. Students walk in thinking that if their paper isn't perfect, then it's a failure. So she does something unexpected. She shows them her own undergraduate essays to show how much her writing has evolved, which is our 7th tip.
Well, English, especially first year composition, is a course that every freshman has to take. And they are so used to teaching to a perfect standard that writing, if they don't get 100, then it's bad. So they come to class with a lot of biases and anxiety. And I introduce my writing to them to help ease their anxiety. So I tell them, writing is an evolving process. Nothing is ever perfect. And I explain that I can relate to having writer's anxiety. I've majored in English. I've taken numerous writing courses, and I show them my own writing. I show them essays from when I was an undergrad to say, hey, this is what my writing looked like when I was your age. And I do that periodically throughout the semester so that they know that I'm in it with them, that I've been in their shoes. I know what they're experiencing. And that has always worked for me, to just be a little vulnerable on my end as the instructor to say, hey, this is what my writing looks like. And even now, as a professor, it's not perfect. When I work on projects and things, it's not perfect. And I have to go through writer's block and other things that you all are experiencing as students. I go through it now as a professional.
Because if their professor, an actual expert, still wrestles with writing sometimes, then maybe struggling doesn't mean they're failing. Maybe it just means they're learning. Of course, confidence isn't just about writing. It's about speaking up, thinking critically, and sometimes even challenging authority. But that only happens if students feel safe enough to take those risks. And Dr. Jennifer Ripley Stickle has a bold way of making that happen, which takes us to our 8th tip. She tricks her students into catching her mistakes.
So first technique I use is that I'm very approachable. The students know who I am. They know my background. They see me make mistakes. Sometimes I'll even make mistakes on purpose just so that they can see that I'm a human and it's okay to make mistakes. Things I'll do to make a mistake is I'll do a clicker question and I'll say, oh, the answer is C, just like I automatically knew what it is. And then I'll look at it and I'll look at their faces and I'll be like, am I wrong? did I mess up? And they'll be like, yeah, I think it's B. And I'll like, well, hold on, let me look. And I'll look and I'll be like, what? You think it's B? Oh, and then they'll tell me, I'm like, oh, you're totally right. I messed up. I mess up sometimes. It's okay. I thank you for correcting me. I appreciate it. And I'll do something silly like that. And I think some of them know that I did that on purpose, but I want them to understand that we're learning and mistakes happen and it's okay. And then during class time is the time to learn from those mistakes so we can work together.
So she's normalizing mistakes before students even have the chance to stress over them. The result? A classroom full of fearless learners who challenge ideas instead of shutting down. Dr. Jennifer Ripley Stickle has spent the past 17 years as a teaching professor and non-majors biology program director at West Virginia University. And the first exam, she thinks it's kind of like a first date. Everyone's formal, everyone's nervous, and they're not quite sure of what's about to happen. But once that initial awkwardness fades, then the real relationship begins. And tip 9 shows us just how she does it.
I practice by a bunch of different ways during the class period so that when we get to the test is easy breezy. And that builds their confidence too, right after that first exam. So in class, I'll do knowledge-based clicker questions. So I'm making sure we're understanding the concepts. I'll do group work sometimes so that we can apply the concepts together, either on case studies or situations. And then I'll have them do homework on their own, which will be both. It will have comprehension, it'll have general knowledge, and it will have them actually show their learning. So if we have all three of those, and I kind of make those a little more challenging than even the test questions are. So we really work, we really understand, we build that confidence. By the time it comes to the test, we take the test and we're like, wow, that wasn't bad because we learned it together. And as soon as we take that first test, I tell them it's like our first date. We're very professional. Everyone's minding their P's and Q's. And then after we take our first test, it's our first date. We liked it. We did well. And now we're in a relationship for the rest of the semester and we can talk and grow and learn. And the dynamic of the course totally changes after that.
In other words, once that first test is over, the nerves settle, the walls come down, and class stops feeling like a performance. And it starts feeling like a conversation. Because the real learning doesn't come from a test. It comes from the moments before it. The risks, the mistakes, the revisions. In other words, the small wins. And that's how confidence is built. We've all seen students convince themselves that they're just bad at a subject. But confidence isn't about one test. It's about the long game. So what happens when a student has already failed? Not once, but twice. Can confidence still be built? Charlotte Dearauge, an assistant professor at York University, says yes. And here's our final tip.
So firstly, providing structure and clear expectations at the beginning of the semester. So within our department, we are learning outcome driven. And then this coupled secondly with practice. I can't emphasize this enough. Practice with the freedom to make mistakes, to develop confidence with the course content. I'll share a situation with a student who was not successful in introductory biology. She had taken the course twice previously with different instructors, but struggled to pass both times, earning 47% and 49%. She came into tears after her first midterm, wanting to pass the course, but concerned that she would fail again for the third time and probably not continue on in biology. So we talked about her current study approaches for the course and came up with a new strategy. This entailed by reviewing the in-course, the in-class, iClicker and textbook questions and encouraging her to attend either the flip sessions or student hours to address any gaps. So at first she shared she was hesitant to attend our group mentorship sessions and found it a bit challenging to stick to a schedule as she was balancing multiple shifts at work. I encouraged her to attend the sessions that worked with her schedule, even if she hadn't had an opportunity to review the content to hopefully learn collaboratively with her peers. Well, after keeping up to date with the content and reorganizing her study schedule and her hours for work, she was successful in midterm 2 and ended up getting a B on the final exam. We also have a policy where students who perform better in the final exam, because it's cumulative, their final exam ends up replacing their lowest midterm grade. And at the end of the semester, she in fact decided to continue on in the biology program, and I can share with you she felt a lot less anxious about taking another biology course.
Confidence isn't something students just wake up with one day. It's something they work towards, and educators help them to put in that work. So with the right strategies and the right mindset, a student who thought they couldn't just did. And that's a wrap. From community building to embracing failure, we've packed this classroom survival kit with confidence-boosting strategies from some of the best teachers in the business. Because confidence isn't something students have, it's something they build. Do you have a confidence-building hack that works wonders in your classroom? Leave us a voicemail at 512-765-4688, and you might just hear yourself on a future episode. Bonus points if it's the kind of advice that makes us laugh and learn. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share. Your support means everything. I'm Marissa Bluestone, and I'll catch you next time as we go from me to we and discover 10 strategies to build belonging in your classroom. Thanks so much for tuning in today.